This visualization shows a disconnect in the software industry. Over its entire lifetime, the average software as a service company spends exactly 8 hours on pricing strategy. Yet, as the data on the right shows, optimizing that strategy alone can increase revenue growth by 25%. The timing of these decisions influences survival. When first-round capital analyzed founders who struggled to raise capital, they found those teams were 3 times more likely to have delayed their monetization strategy. A business model represents the foundational architecture of a product, rather than a price tag applied at the end of development. Ignoring monetization during the early stages often results in a product architecture that cannot support a scaling business. The pricing mechanism serves as the engine that determines how and if a company can grow. This is the Brian Balfour probability-adjusted willingness to pay equation. It states that for a sale to occur, the purchase price must be lower than the potential value of the software multiplied by the probability of realizing that value. The potential value variable represents the promised return on investment or the utility the buyer expects the software to provide. The probability variable is where most products fail. Corporate buyers are historically skeptical that promised software value will be realized after implementation. As this probability percentage drops, it mathematically shrinks the price a customer is willing to pay. Every successful pricing model we will examine serves as a strategy to address this equation. They either lower the upfront friction of the purchase price or use hands-on usage to increase the buyer's perceived probability of success. This illustrates the core tension of software finance, the gap between upfront customer acquisition cost and deferred customer lifetime value. The traditional seat-based model relies on predictable recurring revenue, charging a flat fee per user to recoup acquisition costs over time. This is a retail shelf of boxed software, representing the legacy model of upfront sales. Before the cloud, software was a one-time transaction. These are floppy disks, which limited distribution to a physical medium. Purchasing them meant you owned a specific version forever. SaaS transformed this into a relational, continuous service. However, the predictable seat-based model creates an artificial ceiling on revenue. It fails to capture additional profit from a company's heaviest users, who may extract 10 times more value than a light user while paying the same price. While seat-based pricing offers financial stability, it creates a gap between the price a customer pays and the actual utility they receive from the product. Closing that gap requires a different value metric. In many contexts, the number of users logged into a system is an arbitrary predictor of how much value that system is creating. When Expensify competed against Concur, they undercut rigid seat licenses by charging only for active users. Similarly, infrastructure companies like New Relic tie revenue to application traffic rather than employee headcount. As customer traffic increases, so does revenue. This alignment allowed New Relic to reach a net dollar retention rate of 123%. Revenue expands automatically as the customer succeeds. This growth happens without a sales team because the expansion is built directly into the product's pricing unit. Selecting a value metric that scales with customer success is the most efficient way to compound growth and lock in net negative churn. This focus on value also dictates how companies acquire users. Freemium functions as a deliberate strategy to reduce acquisition costs within a product-led growth motion. In the Balfour equation, freemium targets the probability multiplier. Hands-on usage lets a buyer build habits and see results before paying, increasing confidence. With success proven, the customer accepts a higher purchase price, bypassing the friction of corporate procurement. The ad-supported model is an extreme variation of this logic. It trades direct user revenue for third-party advertiser payments. This requires massive user scale and a shift in focus. Instead of average revenue per account, product managers must optimize for click-through rates and cost per click. Shifting the monetization gate to after a habit has formed allows a company to radically accelerate its user acquisition. This shows the structural difference between a linear software pipeline and a two-sided platform. A platform cannot be monetized until it achieves a reliable match rate. Gross merchandise value is a vanity metric. If buyers can't find what they need, the platform stalls. To avoid this, operators use pricing asymmetry to solve the cold start problem of an empty network. Platforms often subsidize the side that is most difficult to attract. By offering free access to that side, they build the volume required to charge a premium to the other. In platform economics, pricing serves as the primary operational lever used to balance supply and demand. The business model dictates your organizational structure, the iron triangle of go-to-market alignment. In product-led motions, marketing drives self-serve traffic, the product handles onboarding, and sales remains hands-off until product-qualified leads trigger enterprise upgrades. Conversely, traditional enterprise software's high upfront costs demand high-touch sales forces. Logic Co. proved this by switching from prepaid annual contracts to a pay-as-you-go model. By removing that friction, they signed more customers in 2 months than they had in the previous 4 years. These structures must be perfectly aligned. A product built for frictionless adoption will fail if anchored to the high costs of an enterprise sales force. Product managers cannot design features in isolation. Every feature must be understood through the lens of how it will be sold. Your responsibility is to define the value metric, manage the friction points, and tightly align the unit economics with the go-to-market motion. The product is the business model, and the business model is the product.